Hi, everybody. This is Melissa Kamanya, your Affordable Housing Coordinator. Just going to give it a few more seconds for folks to join us, and we'll start in just a moment. Okay, we're ready to go. As I mentioned, my name is Melissa Kamanya. I am your Affordable Housing Coordinator, and you are here today to hear about affordable housing development and public services activities in 2025-2026. As we begin, this just for clarification, this meeting today is to review our upcoming funding cycle, which has not opened yet, but we'll be providing you with all the information that you need to know. There will be opportunity for questions and answers, and I will make sure that at certain breaks in the presentation, you have time to ask questions. In the meantime, if you have questions, you are all muted and your cameras are off. My camera is also off for now. If you have a question in the question and answer time, you may raise your hand by clicking the raise hand icon. At that time, I will call on you and give you the opportunity to unmute. Please note that I will only be answering questions in the question and answer slides. We won't be stopping the flow to answer questions midstream. Affordable housing in Bend is, according to the City of Bend's Comprehensive Plan Housing Chapter, Section 520, there are definitions for what affordable housing is for the purposes of city policy or code. On your screen, you will see the 2024 to 2025 Area Median Income or AMI chart for Deschutes County. When we think about housing units for sale or for homeownership, we are talking about, in general, the household annual income of 80% AMI or below. When we're talking about housing units that are for rent, in general, we are talking about 60% of the area median income or below. In general, for both homeownership and for rental, we also want to discuss spending no more than 30% of the annual household income on housing-related costs. The area median income in Bend, this is a graphic that is on our city website. This just shows kind of the climate and the temperature of housing in our community. This was most recently updated in 2024. And most people don't really understand, well, what does AMI mean and how much I can afford? So if you look at this chart, you can see that 80% of the area median income, or in April of 2024, for a household of four, was around $87,000. That is our teacher, probation officer, paralegal. According to that income level, someone can afford the rent of $2,000 approximately and a home price of approximately $301,000. That little red dotted line on the top there, the median home price of $707,000, that is what the average home price is right now. As you can see, that is far greater than what our even 150% of the area median income persons can afford. City of Bend has multiple affordable housing tools to help our developers make affordable housing happen in the community. That includes policy and code updates, opportunity to purchase surplus land, property tax exemptions, our affordable housing fund, and state and federal funding. The goal of the work that I do and the work of the City of Bend's Housing Department is to meet the housing need. We know nationwide housing production has not kept pace with population growth, and Bend is not excluded from that. Housing units are not available at price points all along the housing continuum. So this graphic here shows one end of the housing continuum is houselessness and the other end is market rate homeownership. At each step along the way, we have an estimated deficit. And these numbers here with the red arrows show how many units are needed at each of the stops along the housing continuum. Please note that these are estimated shortages based on extrapolations from the 2020 Regional Housing Needs Assessment. Most recently, in 2023, a report from Up for Growth said that Bend has more than 6,000 units short, or a shortage of more than 6,000 units, and it's broken down in this continuum. Basically, how this continuum works is for you to move up or down the continuum in housing, there has to be housing available at the next step up or the next step down. As an example, if you are in affordable rental housing and you want to move to affordable homeownership, there has to be an affordable homeownership opportunity available for you. But as this graphic shows, we're about 950 units short on that stop in the continuum. That's why this work is so important to add housing along every single stop on the continuum. Another tool that the city has is what we call expediting review and permitting. In the planning division there and the building division, there are expedited opportunities for affordable housing development. In the planning division, there's a type 1 development action where decision will be written within 2 weeks of the submittal of the permit. For a type 2 development action, a decision will be written or the first public hearing will be held within 6 weeks of the date of submittal. In the building division, preliminary review will be completed within 3 working days of the date of submittal. And once any deficiencies have been addressed, permits will be issued within 10 working days. System development charges or SDC exemptions. System development charges pay for new infrastructure, system like sewer, water, transportation, and the city of Bend collects this on behalf of Bend Parks and Recreation. In Bend, there are, such as other cities, there are exemptions that allow affordable housing developers to not have to pay those. And the city of Bend cooperates with this. There is a deed restriction requirement that is a 20-year deed restriction where developers agree that those units will be affordable for 80% of the area median income or below in that 20-year period. If for some reason affordability is not met, then the system development charges are paid back to the city. There are also many city code incentives, most specifically regarding accessory dwelling units or ADUs, the parking bonus, cottage code developments, density bonus, and multifamily property tax exemptions. If you want more information about this, you can visit the Bend Municipal Code and you can read all about these different incentives in much more detail. The City of Bend also offers surplus land through a process called an RFP. This requires a strong collaboration across multiple departments, frequent contact with ODOT and other regulatory agencies. The city has an inventory of surplus properties, and when a property is available, the property is sold at a set price with criteria related to the best project for the community. It's sold at a price that just really covers the cost of what the city has invested for preparing the land for sale. Presently, we don't have any opportunities at this moment, but last year, the City of Bend surplus multiple properties. The City of Bend Affordable Housing Fund, or what we will call AHF throughout the rest of the presentation, was adopted by Council in 2006. It's a fee of 1/3 of 1% of the total building permit valuation. This helps address the lack of workforce housing, low vacancy rates, and an increase in home prices. And every year, this fund generates significant funding, which we then put back out into the community in competitive application processes like this one that we're talking about today. There are many federal and state resources for affordable housing, such as the Community Development Block Grant Funds, which funds housing and community development programs, including service providers. It is important to note that this is only available for nonprofit organizations. Oregon Housing and Community Services regularly offers LAHTC, which is low income housing tax credits. It is a highly competitive process for tax credits of affordable housing investments. Similarly, OHCS, or Oregon Housing and Community Services, offers the LIFT program, or Local Innovation Fast Track Housing Program. It is also funding through a competitive process, although it is changing. They're undergoing significant programmatic changes. It is still offered to our partners. Okay, so our affordable housing department has a policy that I just want to touch on briefly here. The City of Bend shall provide assistance in the form of grants to public services projects selected for funding through the CDBG program. Similarly, in this application funding cycle, we are offering CICT funding, and that is also provided in the form of a grant. Loans are all other types of projects other than public services categories. This is home buyer assistance, land acquisition, and other projects for housing. Those funds are offered in the form of a loan. The City of Bend does require all applicants to review our grants versus loan policy, which is provided in the application packet. If you are unsure about it, we can also send you a copy of the policy if you email housing@bendoregon.gov. The City of Bend every 5 years develops what's called a consolidated plan. The consolidated plan establishes goals and funding parameters for 5-year timeframe under HUD guidance. The current goals are as follows. Priority number 1 is to assist homeless with shelter and services. Priority 2 is to create and preserve affordable rental housing. Priority 3 is to provide support to necessary public services. Priority 4 is to create and preserve affordable home ownership. And priority 5 is for infrastructure. The gist of this is that all of the projects and all of the applications that come to the Affordable Housing Committee through this process should fall under one of these priorities. Let's talk about national objectives. This is from guidance from HUD, the Housing and Urban Development Department. Low to moderate income housing, and there's a citation here. It means families and individuals whose incomes do not exceed 80% of the median income of the area involved, as determined by the Secretary with adjustments for smaller and larger families. When we talk about LMI, or low moderate income benefits, such as economic development, that is a separate category, as is limited clientele. We also have a national objective from HUD for slum and blight, urban renewal, and urgent needs. All of these require a designation or declaration that currently does not apply. Most recently, urgent need was during the COVID pandemic. It is important to note that under the definition of HUD, the City of Bend does not have slum or blight designation. Okay, now this is a great opportunity for us. If there is anybody that has any questions, this is a great time for you to raise your hand. Okay, not seeing any raised hands. Oh, I do see a raised hand. Okay, Melanie, I'm giving you permission to ask your question. Go ahead.
Great, thank you so much. In terms of the goals, the proposal I had in mind would fall under economic development, but it's not infrastructure. So would a economic development program that's geared more towards like micro enterprise technical assistance like job creation and job retention be considered, or is it only under infrastructure?
Thank you for asking that question, Melanie. To be clear, while that isn't specifically called out as one of our priority goals through our consolidated plan, you are still welcome to apply for your project as it is. And
Great.
ultimately, it's our Affordable Housing Department, our Affordable Housing Advisory Committee that makes the final decisions, and you are welcome to apply.
Thank you so much.
Yes. Any other questions before we move on to the next section? Okay. Let's go. Let's move on. Let me take us down to the next slide here. All right. Let's talk about low to moderate income housing. Thinking about rental units, and I mentioned earlier in the presentation that there are different income guidelines for rental projects versus homeownership projects. When we are talking about rent in CDBG rental projects, they have to be set at levels which are affordable to low to moderate income persons. As I mentioned, households cannot pay more than 30% for their rent and utilities. And each project must be undertaken in such a manner that rents are truly affordable to LMI persons. So there has to be some type of controls in that and some guidelines or restrictions. Similarly, an LMI household must occupy any one unit structure. One LMI household must occupy any two-unit structure, and 51% of any structure with greater than 3 units must be occupied by LMI households. Let's talk about economic development or low to moderate benefit. Job training and placement, peer counseling, childcare, and transportation is included if at least 51% of the persons benefiting are LMI or low to moderate income. Economic activities designed to create or retain permanent jobs, at least 51% must be made available to persons or held by LMI persons. Public benefit standards or economic development. Just some technical details here. The amount of CDBG assistance cannot exceed $50,000 per full-time equivalent FTE or $1,000 per LMI person to which goods and services are provided by the activity. And later in the presentation, I will answer more questions about what is eligible and not an eligible expense. So we will get to that. Similarly, public benefit standards have to create or retain at least one FTE permanent job per $35,000 of CDBG funds used. And they must provide goods and services to an area where the number of LMI persons served by the assisted business amounts to at least one LMI person per $350 of CDBG funds used. Let's talk a little bit about low moderate income clientele. 51% must be LMI. The activity must benefit clientele presumed to be principally LMI. Abused children, battered spouses, elderly persons, severely disabled adults, homeless persons, illiterate adults, persons living with AIDS, and migrant farm persons. Or you have to document the family size and income, have eligibility requirements limiting to LMI persons only, or be of such a nature and in such a location that it can be concluded that clients are primarily LMI. That is a lot of information. In short, what this is really saying is HUD is determining for us kind of like the guidelines and how we determine what projects are eligible under FUD funding. I'm going to pause here. I know that was a lot of technical information. And I'm going to look and see if anybody has any questions about what we just discussed. I'll give you a second to raise your hand. Okay, no hands raised. We're going to keep going. Okay, let's talk about when you're thinking about your project. There's some things that we're going to be asking you in the application. In your project summary, we would like to know the need or the problem that you have to address. Where is your project? Who are you planning to serve? There's multiple questions that we'll be asking about your agency, such as your background and your mission, your nonprofit determination. So I will repeat here that for CDBG funds, we do not provide funding directly to the public. You must be a nonprofit. Has to have a nonprofit determination for CDBG funds. We will ask for your articles of incorporation and bylaws, board minutes, information about personnel, financial information such as committed funding sources, financial statements, financial reviews or audits, your UEI number or unique entity identifier number. Formerly, we would ask for your DUNS number. Now we ask for the UEI. This has only been in place for since 2022. And if you are a new organization and you're not sure what a UEI is, our department can provide that technical assistance to direct you to the proper places to get that started. We'll also ask you for your business registration information, or we will look at sam.gov for federal department information if there is any. Regarding timely performance, we want you to understand that CDBG in particular has some pretty specific timeliness guidelines. So when we're looking at CDBG applications, the priority will be for what we call shovel-ready applications. That is a project that is ready to go and is ready to use this funding. Spending projections will be checked, and if there are concerns, there will be a possibility of reduced funding or retracted funding. Timeliness factors will also be reported to the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee throughout the program year, and timeliness factors will be considered in future applications for affordable housing resources. In other words, how a project is spent and milestones met, et cetera, that information will be used throughout the year and also provided to our committee when new funding applications come in. Let's talk about your budget considerations. Think about things like building in costs for infrastructure. Are there additional environmental costs? Um, are there ADA compliance issues that you need to build into your budget and into your project? Think about all of these things while you're developing your application. Regarding your project and certain type of record keeping that we require you to have, national objectives require us to ask for financial records, progress reports, and your financial records could include bills, receipts, invoices, payroll records, timesheets, financial audits, and statements. Again, that depends on what your project is, and the specifics of what we will ask for will be communicated to you as well. There will be a final report that you will have to submit at the end of your application year or your funding year. That will include leverage information. And we do require that you maintain your records for 4 years after the final payment and all other pending matters are closed. This is a federal guideline that the city is teaching you so that you can comply with. Okay, national objectives. Let's talk about some measures, outcomes, and indicators. So when we talk about performance measures, three big guidelines here. HUD either asks, is the project creating suitable living environments? Is it providing decent housing, or is it creating economic opportunities? All projects have to fall under one of those guidelines. When we look at outcomes, are the outcomes availability or accessibility, such as services, infrastructure, public services, et cetera? Is it affordability? Affordability to persons of LMI, including housing, infrastructure, or services? Or is it sustainability, improving livability? Indicators are leverage funding, the number of persons, households, businesses, or units or beds assisted, income levels, and race and ethnicity disability data. We ask for a lot, but we help you and we help set up the framework for what we need to have reported back to us. When we think about program management standards, we will help you understand internal controls, accounting records. We want you to know that all accounting records must be supported by source documentation. Allowable costs, loan servicing, cash depositories, such as bank ratings, and CDBG guidelines with acquired real property. In addition, we will be asking for an org chart and definition of duties. We will be making sure that there is a system of authorization and supervision. There must be adequate separation of duties. Hiring and compensation policies must ensure that staff qualifications commensurate with job responsibilities. We will be checking that there's secure storage of accounting records with limited access, periodic review of financial records to actual assets and liabilities, and a policy for personally identifiable information, or PII, and we'll also ask how you protect that. Thinking further about program management and accounting records, get familiar with 2 CFR 200. That is a federal guideline that we use internally in our department, and that is all the bones in the framework. If you would like a copy of that, happy to provide that to you. It talks about audit requirements or exceptions as well. Here are additional things that we'll be looking at: chart of accounts, cash receipts journal, cash disbursements journal, payroll, general ledger, capacity requirement. Okay. Any questions on these guidelines that I mentioned? Go ahead and raise your virtual hand if you have any questions. All right, I see a raised hand. Let me see who that is. I don't see a raised hand. Okay. Well, let's move on. I think this next part is what you have all been waiting for. We'll be talking about the available funding and explain some more details. I do want to make sure you understand what allowable and not allowable costs are. Program management allowable costs are considered to be necessary, reasonable, and directly related to the CDBG funding. They are authorized by the City of Bend, consistently treated expenditures. The cost is allocable to CDBG. The cost is the net of all applicable credits. So it's important for you to understand that anything that is billed to CDBG cannot be considered a profit to the sub, or what we call you, our subrecipients of federal funding. And allowable costs are not prohibited under federal, state, or local laws or regulations. Let's talk about what are some ineligible costs. So there's a long list here. I'll just go through these a little quickly, but buildings used for general conduct of government or general government expenses are ineligible. The purchase of construction equipment or the purchase of personal property, furnishings, fixtures, or motor vehicles. Operating and maintenance expenses, ineligible. New housing construction is ineligible under CDBG. Income payments other than emergency payments for housing, food, or clothing. The purchase of gift cards is not eligible. Any cash payments or direct grants to individuals, nope. Any car-related expenses, including gas cards, gas vouchers, or car repairs, are not eligible, and political activities are not eligible costs. Okay. When we talk about loan servicing, any loans must be clear and loan information must be easily accessible. So when we think about what does that mean to be clear, there will be clear repayment terms and default definitions, descriptions of how defaults can be resolved, and what actions will be taken if a loan is in default, and what is pledged as security for each loan. You remember the loans are, most of our funding is offered in the form of a loan with exception of public services. In addition, collection procedures that provide for recognition of all current amounts due and when past payments were received. There'll be notification when payments are overdue, as well as a procedure for taking further action to collect overdue amounts and criteria for writing off bad debts. When we talk about acquired real property or land acquisition, there are procedures required to ensure that there is ongoing compliance with the national objective associated with real property acquired or improved with CDBG funds in excess of $25,000. Program income from the sales or rental of a property is recorded and reported. If there's an outstanding loan with the City of Bend that continues when real estate is acquired, and it's met the national objectives after the expiration of the city agreement, then national objective requirements will extend until the loan is reimbursed to the City of Bend and the U.S. Treasury. Real estate may change use for other national objectives through providing affected citizens with notice of and opportunity to comment on any proposed change. Okay, legal compliance. Procurement and contracting requires the following: a free and open competitive process, proper documentation of purchasing activities and decisions, including records to detail the significant history of procurement, pre-qualified lists of vendors or contractors, an exclusion of contractors that develop or draft specifications. There will be no awards for party which is debarred or suspended or is otherwise excluded from or ineligible for participation. There's a written selection procedure for procurement transactions. It is important to note we will be asking for evidence to show that you have avoided the purchase of unnecessary or duplicate items. You'll hear us talk about duplication of benefits. We will be asking for documentation for that. Similarly, we will be asking for evidence that any excess or surplus property or intergovernmental agreements for procurement or the use of common goods or services. All contracts and purchase orders must be signed by an authorized representative. Items delivered must be consistent with the purchase order. Timely payment to vendors, a cost or price analysis, profit or fee negotiated must be separate from the price. And please include 24 CFR 8536 or 8448 in the contract. If you have questions about that, we will provide a link for you to review that document. Okay. Similarly, you cannot use cost plus a percentage of cost pricing. And there will be a documented system of contract administration and a written code of conduct governing employees, officers, or agents engaged in the award or administration of contracts. Pardon me, jumped a little ahead. Okay. With respect to the environmental review, no party involved with the project, including subrecipients, may commit funds to the project, including incurring project costs, until the City of Bend completes the appropriate environmental review and public notification process. And HUD must approve a certification of compliance with environmental laws and request a release of funds from environmental conditions. So if you have a project that you're using CDBG funds for land acquisition or the production of affordable housing through down payment assistance, et cetera, we will be doing an environmental review. In short, you cannot start the project. We tell you you cannot turn a shovel over until this process is complete and HUD authorizes the release of funds. There are many different levels of environmental reviews. We actually do these for our public services projects as well, but those are fast and go through rather quickly. Some environmental reviews can take quite some time, depending on what the project encounters and what it involves. But all work has to stop until the project is completed. If you're not sure about this, we will help you with this. All right. Regarding the Uniform Relocation Act, we want you to understand that an important requirement of this funding is that anytime a project is proposed or funded, it cannot displace persons. So when we look at relocation, real property acquisition, there must be a one-for-one housing replacement. This is important for federal guidance. Lastly, before we get to our next question slide, let's talk about monitoring. I mentioned throughout these slides that awarded projects have City of Bend monitoring. City of Bend will make site visits and review program files as necessary to fulfill all CDBG funds are being maintained and oversight is used in accordance with program requirements. In a standard year, a new awardee or an awardee that has had timeliness issues in the past may have two monitorings. One will be in person. We can also do desktop monitoring where we require files to be sent to us. But 100% of our awardees of all of our funding sources have monitoring of some level just to ensure that program requirements and guidelines are being met. So I'm going to go to the next slide. It's a question slide, and I see some Q&A questions that have come in. So let me go through these before I open up to additional questions. Question number one, will this presentation be made available in slides? Yes, it will be made available in slides, and there will be a link on our website later this afternoon with a link to rewatch the video. In addition, all questions from this presentation will be put into our initial Q&A document that will live on our website as well. What does capacity requirement mean on the last slide? Colleen, I will get back to that. Not sure. I'm going to unmute you in a second to ask that question out loud because I'm not sure what slide you're talking about. But let me get to this next question. Will the slides be emailed? Yes, the slides will be emailed. So Colleen, I'm going to find you and I'm going to unmute you. And I'd like you to go ahead and ask your question about capacity. You should be able to unmute.
Thanks. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Perfect. Yeah, my question was about the last bullet point, which was capacity requirement on the slide about program management accounting records.
Okay, yes. So that is basically saying, does your organization have the capacity to do the work as you have described it to be? So we'll be looking at if you are saying we're going to move mountains and we're going to take on a $4 billion project, but you have two staff. That doesn't match. So we want to make sure that you have the capacity and you have the ability to do what you said you would do.
Great, that makes sense. Thank you so much.
Sure. All right, let's see. I see another question that came in. To use CDBG funds toward home repair for LMI persons, is the city able to perform a blanket environmental review, or is it needed for each site? Mr. Nordquist, that is an amazing question. I will have to get back to you on that. I have noted that question and I will have to do a little bit of consultation, and that will be typed out and provided in the Q&A section that will be posted on the website later this week. Thank you for asking that. Are there any other live questions that anybody would like to unmute or raise your hand if you want to ask a question live? And thank you for bearing with me with all the technical details. We're about to get into how much funding is available and how applications will go. Okay, I don't see any other raised hands. Feel free to use the Q&A box if that is more useful to you. Okay, the moment you've been waiting for. Let's talk about the buckets of funding. This year, the city is offering 3 separate types of funding for applicants. We have the AHF, or Affordable Housing Fund, of $1.2 million. Projects for this bucket of funding, if you will, are up to 100% of the area median income. Doesn't have to be up to that amount. We often have projects under this bucket that where applications are written for 80% of the area median income or below. Please just make sure that in your application, you are very clear about what your AMI top limit is. CDBG funds are $415,000 available for AH, or what I'm going to say is affordable housing development, and $95,000 available for public services. Keep in mind that CDBG guidelines are for 80% of the area median income or below. And this year we have CICT, or it's an acronym that I will explain, but we have CICT funding available for 2 separate types of projects. For up to 241,000 of that can be for public services, and an estimate of 241,000 of that is for affordable housing development. So let me explain this a little bit. When we say up to 241,000 for public services, the code in the Bend Municipal Code specifies that this is intended to be split 50-50 between housing development and public services, but the cap for public services is half the bucket. So if we decide, or if let me say, if the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee decides to give all of the available CICT funding to affordable housing development project, or that 482,000, it could all go to housing. Or it could be split in any way, but the maximum amount of that could go to public services is 241,000. Of note, though, the cap for this funding is 30% of the area median income. I know you're going to have questions, but bear with me because I might be answering them in a second. Let's go back to thinking about your application. When you are in the application in Neighborly, you will have the opportunity to break up your request in these separate columns here. How much of your entire request are you asking for CDBG funds? How much are you asking for affordable housing funds? And how much are you asking for CICT funds? Please note, in either your presentation or your application in Neighborly, if you're requesting CDBG funds, but you are open to accepting the funds as affordable housing funds, please write that in your application. Please make that clear that you are open to the fund source shifting as long as the AMI limits don't change and the end goal, or the end project, remains the same. Going to give a few examples of how this might look. So for those of you on the call that are thinking about a public services project, and your project will benefit folks that are earning 30% of the area median income or below, we want you, and all of you, no matter what your project is, when you're filling out your application this year, please fill it out for what you really need. Doesn't mean that's what you'll really receive, but we do want to understand the magnitude, if you will, of the need in the community. So let's say, again, your project is going to be serving clients with public services that earn 30% of the area median income or below. And remember, we already talked earlier that you are verifying income. You have systems in place where you're tracking that you're verifying that. You have record-keeping policies in place. You have a couple options. You could split your request and you could say, well, okay, I'll ask for some of that from CDBG and some of that from CICT. I just split it in half. So going back to that budget slide, you could split your request in any way between the 2 buckets, or you could just say, you know what, I'm just going to make it easy on myself and just ask for all of it from one bucket. You get to choose. But the key here is for you to apply for any amount of CICT. It has to be serving clients 30% of the area median income or below. Let's say that you have a project where you're only serving clients up to 80% AMI, then and nobody under 30% of the income, then you'd only apply for that CDBG bucket of the whole amount in CDBG. But to the right, to the left here, you see I have a project that they hypothetical project applied for 45,000 CDBG and 5,000 CICT. Let's say that you know that your project is going to benefit 90% of clients earning up to 80%, and 10% of your projects or your clients are 30% or below. Make that very clear in your application, and then you can apply for both buckets that match what you say your project will do. Okay, example number 3. If you are applying for land acquisition for a rental project, and we talked about for CDBG, like that guideline for a rental project is 60% of the area median income or below, you have 2 choices. You could apply for that through CDBG or the Affordable Housing Fund. You pick. You pick how you want to fund that and how you want to apply for that. CICT bucket is not eligible here, so that bucket disappeared because that's for 30% of the area median income. Similarly, home buyer assistance. If you are thinking of requesting, let's say, $250,000, you can choose affordable housing or CDBG for that, but not CICT, because in general, home buyer assistance is not typically for 30% of the area median income or below. And I'm going to pause here because I see a lot of questions coming in about this. So let me pull this up. Can CICT funds be used for down payment assistance? Amy, I'm glad you asked this. The short answer is if a bank will authorize a loan for a client that is under 30% of the area median income, and their debt to income ratio is no greater than 40%, it's unlikely that that will happen for someone with such a low income. So if those criteria are met, yes, but it is a difficult puzzle piece to be able to make that pencil. So while it can be used for down payment assistance, it is unlikely that it'll work for that. And then do CICT funds follow the same policy and parameters as CDBG? That is a good question. In short, yes, all of our policies kind of follow the same guidelines as a city, where we do require the same monitoring, the same basic guidelines with record keeping and financial documentation, subrecipient participation. All of that basically follows in the same guidance as CDBG. Okay. Any other questions we will get to in just a moment. Here's our schedule. This is the wrong slide. I apologize for that. Here's a QR code. You take a second and you scan that QR code, you will see that we have our entire schedule outlined on our City of Bend website. Applications are not open today. We have given all of you 3 weeks to hear all this information, do a little bit of research, reach out for technical support if you need it, and applications open later this month. And they close on October 28th. So applications will be open for approximately 1 month. You have access, as I mentioned, through housing@bendoregon.gov. If you have questions about the application, you have questions about any of the material covered today, please send an email to housing@bendoregon.gov, and in the subject line, indicate that you're asking a question about the available funding. They will be answered in a process that we call FAQ. So all questions will be answered in a timely manner and then posted at regular intervals. So if you have a question and you're not sure, visit this site first. check and you'll scroll down here. I didn't show the FAQs, but it's further down on the page. Check it first because maybe somebody's already answered that question. And if they haven't, then we can direct you back to the website or we will answer it for you. If you have not already opened an account in Neighborly, here's a QR code to access Neighborly. Applications aren't open yet. So if you log in there today and you make your account today, you'll just see a blank screen that says it'll either show you what applications you've submitted in the past, or it'll be the same screen with the basic information about what's to come. Applications open at the end of the month. Okay, I'm going to stop my screen share. I'm going to turn on my camera so that you can all see me. And let's see if there are any other questions. I do see extra questions in the Q&A. Give me just a second to pull those up. Okay, the QR code is not working. All right. Thank you for letting me know that. I will make sure that we get the corrected QR code in the presentation. Any other live questions? Can raise your hand. Okay. All right. Well, if there are no, oh, I do see a hand raised. Just one moment, please. I cannot see whose hand is raised. I'm so sorry for the inconvenience. If you wouldn't mind lowering your hand and raising it again, let me see if I can get that to work. Okay, Amy, I'm thinking it's you. So okay, there we are. Go ahead, Amy. You should have permission to unmute yourself.
Yes, the unmute button.
Okay.
I put another question in the chat, but I was specifically asking about the conflict of interest policy that CDBG has, that
Yes.
the affordable housing fee funds do not.
Okay,
Do the CICT funds have that?
Amy, I'll have to get back to you on that. That'll be another piece of information that I need to have a little bit more background information on, and we'll put that in the Q&A from this session. We'll get back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for asking. Okay, any other questions? All right, well, what I'd like you all to know is that I am here as a helper for you. If this is your 10th time applying for funding or your first time, please use me as a resource. You can reach me through that housing@bendoregon.gov email. I'm here to offer technical assistance until the day the application's open. Once the application's open, the technical assistance pauses because then it's a public process. And while you go through the application, you will need to submit your questions through the Q&A. If you go to our website, that whole process is outlined there. And then after applications closed, then we have the opportunity for technical assistance again, where we can help you get ready for the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee presentations and all the things that have to happen. Please know, typically this process takes some time. Funding for the Affordable Housing Fund and CICT funds, those will tend to be available in maybe February or March, maybe as late as April of next year. CDBG funds are taking a little bit longer. The program year starts July 1 of 2025, and depending on when the federal government gets all of their documentation together, we're a pass-through. So once we get their documents and their funding, then we can pass it through to you. Sometimes that could be July 1, sometimes that could be September 1. So we will be communicating those timelines with you. As I mentioned, I'm here to help within limits, of course. Good luck with your presentation, with your application planning. You have 3 weeks before the application drops, if you will, or becomes open. So please reach out if you have any remaining questions. Check our website, the Q&A from today with all questions asked. The ones answered live and the ones not will all be answered there. And we look forward to seeing your applications in a few weeks. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.